When you think of a shoplifter, you likely think of an impoverished person, maybe even a teenager walking out with some petty merchandise because they don't have the money to pay for it. But this is not always the case. In the spring of 2024, husband and wife duo Michelle and Kenneth Mack were charged with running what was perhaps the largest known shoplifting ring in US history. For over a decade, the Macks masterminded a nationwide shoplifting operation, which stole more than $8 million from various retailers. The proceeds from this criminal enterprise allowed the Macks to live a life of luxury, including a $2.7 million mansion in the suburbs of San Diego. Since the end of the pandemic, there's been a rise in so-called organized retail crime, a form of shoplifting executed by coordinated groups. Unlike individual thefts for personal use, these crimes involve stealing items specifically to resell for profit. Many large retailers, including Ulta Beauty and Target, have pointed to organized theft as a key factor behind their missed profit targets. The National Retail Federation claims that shoplifting incidents have almost doubled since the pandemic. In this video, we'll look at the many factors contributing to the rise in shoplifting, and how law enforcement and retailers are reacting. When researching for videos like this, I read hundreds of news articles. It's often hard to understand the full truth, as every media outlet has its own bias. That's why I use Ground News, the world's first news comparison platform. They are an app and a website that brings together related stories in one place to highlight important perspectives often overlooked by mainstream media. For example, California recently passed new laws increasing penalties for shoplifting. This is a very important story which we'll discuss later on in the video. On Ground News, we can see that 66 media outlets covered this topic. They rank each media outlet on a bias scale, so you can compare the left-wing, right-wing, and centrist perspectives. The left-leaning articles talk about the attention-grabbing nature of retail theft, implying that the new laws might be an overreaction. On the other hand, right-leaning articles portray this as repudiation of radical pro-crime policies. Ground News shows you both sides of every argument, which is so important because the truth usually lies somewhere in between. Ground News is offering my viewers 40% off their unlimited Vantage plan, the same plan I use to access all of their features. That's just $5 per month. In a world where news moves fast, and the truth can be hard to find, Ground News helps you see the full perspective. Plus, by subscribing, you're directly supporting my work. So use my link ground.news/WSM to sign up today. And now back to the video. First off, let's look at Michelle and Kenneth Mack, who ran one of the largest shoplifting rings in US history. As far as we know, they never did any of the shoplifting themselves. Instead, they contacted various young women all over California and recruited them to become their foot soldiers. In the shoplifting industry, the people on the ground who steal the items are called boosters. In the case of the Macks, they only hired young women to be their boosters, and there was a very good reason for this. They decided to target makeup stores, specifically Ulta Beauty and Sephora. The good thing about makeup is that some of the products are small, valuable, and easy to resell. For example, these mascaras at Ulta Beauty sell for $20 to $30 each. They are very small. You can easily put a few dozen of them in a large purse and walk out of the store with $1,000 worth of merchandise. Some items are difficult to resell. For example, if you steal a piece of clothing, it may be difficult to find someone who wants to buy that specific size and style. Makeup is much more universal. For any given makeup you steal, a large percentage of women would want to use that makeup. The reason they only hired female boosters was to blend in. A young woman walking into Ulta Beauty with a purse will look no different from any other customer. On the other hand, if a man were to walk into Ulta with a backpack, that would immediately draw suspicion. It is believed that Michelle Mack recruited her boosters over the internet. She may have never even met any of them in person, as most of them live far away from her. We don't know exactly how Michelle found her boosters, but we do know that she paid referral bonuses to boosters if they got their friends to join the enterprise as well. Here's how the operation worked. Michelle and Kenneth Mack would do detailed research on which stores they wanted to hit and what items they wanted. They would communicate with their boosters via text message and online messaging apps. Once the boosters stole the items, they would ship them to a P.O. box in San Diego owned by Michelle Mack. Michelle used Apple Cash, which is basically Apple's version of Venmo, to pay the boosters for their work. Michelle would go to the P.O. box and pick up the merchandise. She brings it back to her San Diego mansion, which doubled as a distribution center for their Amazon storefront. The Macks ran an Amazon storefront which they creatively named the Online Makeup Store. They listed their stolen products for 50% off their normal retail prices. New unopened name brand makeup for half off is too good of a deal for many people to ignore. The stolen makeup sold like hotcakes. We know that in 2022 alone, they sold $1.9 million worth of merchandise. We don't know how much the boosters were paid, but it was probably around 1/4 of the list prices. While this might seem like a raw deal for the boosters, most of them didn't have the expertise to open and operate an Amazon storefront on their own. Without the help of Michelle, they wouldn't know what to do with the large volumes of makeup they stole. Before she started the shoplifting ring, Michelle Mack ran a legitimate e-commerce business that sold imported makeup. This legitimate business was a flop. It's much easier to make profits when you can buy name brand products for 1/4 of list price. In the spring of 2024, 2 of the boosters were arrested in front of an Ulta Beauty. They cooperated with the police and told them about Michelle. It's unclear if the boosters even know Michelle's real name, but the police were easily able to identify her as she owned the P.O. box to which the boosters sent the merchandise. Once they arrested Michelle and Kenneth Mack, they looked at their text message histories. This allowed them to arrest a total of 7 boosters who lived all around California. Police recovered $300,000 worth of stolen merchandise at Mack's residence. Prosecutors allege that the Macks ran this shoplifting ring since at least 2012. It took more than 10 years for them to be caught. During this period, they had sold at least $8 million worth of stolen merchandise on Amazon. They used their ill-gotten gains to fund a lavish lifestyle, including a $2.7 million mansion in the suburbs of San Diego. This begs the question, how were the Macks able to run such a massive criminal enterprise for so long, and how did they finally get caught? Shoplifting is an easy crime to commit, and it's surprisingly difficult to catch the perpetrators. According to the National Association for Shoplifting Prevention, shoplifters are only caught once in every 49 times they steal, and when they are caught, half of the time the store just tells them to leave. Only 1 in 100 times are they arrested. Experienced shoplifters have methods to achieve an arrest rate of far less than 1%. Most large retailers tell their employees not to directly engage shoplifters. For example, here's a Reddit post from a former Ulta employee. If they see someone who they suspect is shoplifting, they are to go to that person and pretend as if they're a regular customer. Ask if they need help finding anything, etc. The idea is, if they know they are being watched, they'll abort the mission and leave the store. However, this is largely a bluff. Ulta employees are not supposed to make any attempts to prevent a suspected shoplifter from leaving the store with stolen merchandise. It's not just Ulta. Almost all major retailers follow this same policy. For example, in 2023, Lululemon fired 2 employees who attempted to apprehend a group of shoplifters. At first, it might seem ridiculous for a retailer to fire employees just for trying to protect the store. But there is a reason for this. Shoplifters are often unstable people who can behave unpredictably. If a store employee tries to apprehend them, this often results in a violent altercation. This can put the safety of the employee, other employees, and other customers at risk. The disruption and danger from an altercation is more costly than the value of the merchandise that is stolen. Store employees can call the police, but by the time the police arrives, the shoplifters will already be long gone. So how are shoplifters caught at all? If you look at body cam footage of shoplifting busts, they almost always target repeat offenders. If somebody shoplifts and the employees notice it, they'll remember what the shoplifter looks like. The next time he walks into the store, the employees immediately call the police. This gives the police enough time to arrive before the suspect leaves. The police will confront the shoplifter. Depending on the situation, they'll either tell the shoplifter to leave or arrest him. Michelle and Kenneth Mack were pros. They knew exactly how this works. Between 2021 and 2023 alone, their boosters conducted at least 230 shoplifting raids at Ulta Beauty. But they rarely, if ever, target the same store twice. They traveled all over the country, hitting dozens if not hundreds of different locations. Whenever they arrive at a new location, the employees have never seen them before, and so have no reason to suspect them. So how were they caught? California State Police ran a multi-year investigation cooperating with loss prevention staff at both Ulta and Sephora. They could see that these boosters were hitting multiple stores all over the state. They didn't know the boosters' names, but they did know what they looked like thanks to security camera footage. They looked at the pattern of shoplifting and tried to predict which stores would be hit next. When the 2 boosters were finally caught, the police were waiting for them before they even entered the store. Many retailers have claimed to have experienced a significant increase in shoplifting since the pandemic. The National Retail Federation, a trade association representing retailers, says that its members have reported a 93% increase in shoplifting in 2023 compared to 2019. This data comes from the retailers themselves. They can compare their sales receipts with their inventory levels to see how much merchandise walked out of the store on its own. However, this seems to contradict national crime statistics collected by the FBI. According to FBI data, larceny, which includes shoplifting, has been declining since the 1990s. While there was a slight uptick in 2022, it remained slightly below 2019 levels. So what can explain this discrepancy? The FBI statistics only count crimes that are reported. In the vast majority of shoplifting cases, the police are not called. Furthermore, local police departments are often inconsistent with how they report shoplifting, so the national statistics may not be complete. Let's look specifically at California, where the alleged rise in shoplifting has received the most media attention. Under California law, if you shoplift merchandise worth less than $950, that is considered a misdemeanor. With a misdemeanor charge, you can technically be jailed for up to 6 months. In practice, misdemeanor offenders almost never receive jail time, as there's not enough room for them in the Golden State's overcrowded prison system. This has allowed shoplifters to act with near impunity. For example, in 2023, CNN sent a reporter to a Walgreens in San Francisco. In the space of just 30 minutes, she witnessed 3 instances of shoplifting. Store employees didn't even bother calling the police. Even if they are arrested, they'll be back on the streets within a few days. But what can explain the reported increase in shoplifting since the pandemic? The lenient laws have been on the books for a long time. For example, the $950 misdemeanor threshold in California has been in place since 2014. Following the pandemic, many retailers faced a labor shortage and rising labor costs. They responded by deploying self-checkout kiosks so they don't need as many cashiers. Some people might pretend to pay at the self-checkout and then walk out of the store with nobody noticing. The increased shoplifting has driven many retailers to greatly scale back and in some cases eliminate self-checkout altogether. The second contributing factor is that today, it's easier than ever to turn stolen merchandise into cash. Remember that the shoplifting Queenpin Michelle Mack sold her product on Amazon. As the popularity of online platforms like Amazon, Facebook Marketplace, and others expands, the motivation to shoplift increases. And finally, high inflation and the cost of living crisis have pushed even middle-class people to become amateur shoplifters. Many people start shoplifting by accident. As they're loading the items into their cart at self-checkout, they may have forgotten to scan 1 or 2 items. A completely honest mistake. They get home and realize that they didn't pay for a few items, and nobody at the store noticed. If it's so easy to get away with, why not do it again? So each time they shop, they'll intentionally forget to scan a few items. Worst case scenario, an employee catches them. They'll just say they forgot to scan, which is plausible. The chances of being arrested are extremely low. Everybody loves to save a little money, but it's not just the financial gain. It can also provide an adrenaline rush and a feeling of control. Many people, even middle-class people, have seen their household budgets stretched due to high inflation. Many shoppers believe that the grocery store is making excessive profits by raising prices. Stealing a few items is their way of getting even. I recently came across an article in a UK-based publication called The Standard. They interviewed a few middle-class shoplifters in London. These same sentiments are almost certainly shared in the US. One shoplifter was a middle-class professional who agreed to be interviewed anonymously. She explained, quote, "Although we were comfortable, I was worried about money in the future. Shops were chaotic and busy, so it was easy to just chuck a few things in the bottom of the pram and not pay for them. Pram is a British word for baby carriage. I got so used to doing it, it became second nature. If I ever got caught, I'd just apologize and smile sweetly and pay. But until that happens, I might as well carry on. It's just too easy not to," unquote. So how have retailers responded to increased shoplifting? In addition to ending self-checkout, many retailers have resorted to locking more and more items behind plexiglass cages. It started off with high-value items, but now even things like candy are locked up. Especially in places like California, the brazen nature of retail crime has resulted in significant media coverage and public backlash. In November of 2024, California voters passed Proposition 36. Among other things, Prop 36 makes it so repeat shoplifters can be charged with a felony, even if the value of merchandise stolen is less than $950. This should hopefully end the situations like we saw at the San Francisco Walgreens, where repeat shoplifters act with seeming impunity. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about organized retail crime? Let us know in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.